The World Cup is supposed to be about nations, about flags and anthems and the weight of an entire country on 23 men.
Aimed in for good.
But sometimes, if you look closely enough, it is about something else. Sometimes it is about a dressing room, a training ground, a philosophy built at one club, then exported to the biggest stage in the world. These are the moments when a club did not just produce a player or two for a national team. These are the moments when a club became a national team. When the same DNA, the same system, the same trust, the same way of seeing the game showed up at the World Cup wearing a different shirt. This is another football day. And these are the 5 greatest cases of a club that almost became a national team. We begin in South Africa. The year is 2010. Germany arrive at the World Cup not as favorites, not as the finished article, but as something more interesting than either. A team in the process of becoming something extraordinary. Fast, young, fearless, and built almost entirely around the DNA of one club. 7 Bayern Munich players were in Germany's squad. Philipp Lahm, the captain in everything but name, the man who could play anywhere and make it look inevitable. Bastian Schweinsteiger Boschrei, the heartbeat of the midfield, already a footballer of rare quality. Thomas Müller, 20 years old, arriving at his first World Cup with the confidence of someone who had already done it all. Miroslav Klose, Mario Gomez, Holger Badstuber, and Hans-Jörg Butt completed the Bayern contingent. Germany finished 3rd in South Africa. They played some of the most exciting football of the tournament, destroying Australia 4-0, dismantling England 4-1, dispatching Argentina 4-0. 4 goals in every knockout game. The same relentless pressing, the same quick combinations, the same trust between players who knew each other's runs before they happened. But the reason this entry is at number 5, rather than higher on the list, is what came next. Because these 7 men, plus Manuel Neuer, who was still at Schalke that year, would return to a World Cup 4 years later, in Brazil, with the same club at their core. And this time, they would not finish 3rd. This was not the finished story. This was the first chapter. The 2010 Germany team was Bayern Munich in formation. The 2014 Germany team was Bayern Munich at its absolute peak. And that story, that continuation, is exactly why this entry belongs on this list. Every great team has a first draft. Before we talk about the 1998 World Cup, we have to talk about Juventus. In the mid to late 1990s, the Turin club was the most powerful team in Europe, Serie A champions, back-to-back Champions League finals. And at the very heart of that extraordinary Juventus side was a group of Frenchmen who understood each other at a molecular level. When France hosted the 1998 World Cup, 6 Juventus players were in their squad. Zinedine Zidane, the best player in the world, who had spent 2 seasons in Turin building towards this moment. Didier Deschamps, the captain, the organizing principle of every team he played in, who had lifted the Champions League trophy at Juventus just 12 months earlier. Lilian Thuram, the right back who had been a revelation at Parma but was already Juventus bound. Patrick Vieira, Thierry Henry, and David Trezeguet completed the 6. In the final against Brazil, Zidane scored 2-headed goals in the first half, both from corners, both from the same delivery pattern that Juventus had worked on in training week after week. Deschamps organized, screened, protected, just as he did in Turin. The French midfield pressed with a coordinated intensity that looked familiar because they had been doing it together, in the same formation, under similar principles for 2 years. And then, the most extraordinary detail of all. The man who handed the World Cup trophy to Deschamps was Michel Platini, president of the organizing committee, and himself the greatest Juventus player of the previous generation. A Juventus captain handed the World Cup to a Juventus captain. The trophy passed through black and white hands on the biggest night in French football history. Some coincidences are not really coincidences at all. This entry is unique on the list because it is not about one club, it is about 2. And the story that surrounds them makes it the most extraordinary entry in football history. Italy won the 2006 World Cup with 5 Juventus players. Buffon, Cannavaro, Zambrotta, Camoranesi, Del Piero, and 5 AC Milan players, Nesta, Gattuso, Pirlo, Gilardino, Inzaghi. 10 players from Serie A's two greatest rivals, playing together, winning together, lifting the trophy together in Berlin. But what makes this story truly extraordinary is what was happening at home while those 23 men were playing in Germany. Serie A was being ripped apart by the Calciopoli match-fixing scandal, and Juventus were at the center of it, while Buffon was making saves that changed games, while Cannavaro was marshalling defenses with an authority that would eventually earn him the Ballon d'Or, while Del Piero was scoring the semi-final goal against Germany that Berlin still talks about. Their club was being prosecuted, investigated, and ultimately relegated, stripped of 2 league titles, sent down to Serie B for the first time in their history. Italy won the World Cup on the 9th of July, 2006. Juventus were officially relegated on the 14th of July. 5 days. 5 days separated the greatest triumph in Italian football from the most catastrophic punishment in its history. The same players, the same shirts, 5 days apart. Buffon, who had won the World Cup on Thursday, arrived back in Turin to find his club in freefall. He stayed, he chose loyalty over everything, and in doing so, he became even more than a great goalkeeper. He became a symbol of what it means to love a club. Milan's 5 players had no such drama at home, but their own story inside this World Cup run is remarkable. Pirlo, who would go on to become one of Italy's greatest ever players, was used as a deep-lying midfielder by manager Lippi in a way that his club had never quite trusted. Gattuso's relentless pressing was the engine of the entire squad. 2 clubs that had spent decades trying to destroy each other, playing together as if they had always been one team. That is the miracle of the national shirt, and this Italy team showed it more powerfully than almost any other. By the summer of 2014, Bayern Munich had just won the treble under Pep Guardiola, adding a 4th consecutive Bundesliga title to their Champions League. 7 Bayern players went to the World Cup in Brazil. And what those 7 players did there, and how they did it, is one of the defining stories of modern football. Manuel Neuer was not just the best goalkeeper in the world, he had reinvented the position, a sweeper keeper who made the space behind his defense disappear, who organized, commanded, swept up danger before it became danger. Philipp Lahm had been converted from fullback to holding midfielder by Guardiola and was now one of the most intelligent players on the planet. Thomas Müller scored 5 goals and still barely seemed to be trying. Toni Kroos was the metronome, 24 years old, already playing with the calm of a man who had seen everything. Bastian Schweinsteiger, Jerome Boateng, and Mario Götze completed the 7. The 7-1 against Brazil in Belo Horizonte was not just a football result, it was a philosophical statement. Germany scored 5 goals in the first 29 minutes against a Brazil side playing at home, carrying the hopes of a nation, and the architects of that demolition were almost entirely from Munich. Kroos scored twice, Müller got 3. Schweinsteiger drove the team forward. Neuer stood like a man watching a film he had already seen. And then the final. Extra time. 113 minutes gone. Mario Götze came off the bench, a player who had made one of German football's most controversial transfers, leaving Dortmund for Bayern just 1 year earlier, and controlled Andre Schürrle's cross with his chest and volleyed it into the net. Germany won. Argentina 0. The World Cup was won by a Bayern player, with an assist from a Chelsea player, created by a pattern that Pep Guardiola had drilled into the squad at the Allianz Arena 12 months before. Lahm lifted the trophy. The club captain of Bayern Munich lifted the World Cup. Of course he did. We have arrived at the only possible number 1, the most complete, the most dominant, the most philosophically total expression of a single club becoming a national team that football has ever seen. 8 FC Barcelona players were in Spain's 2010 World Cup squad. Victor Valdés in goal, Carles Puyol and Gerard Piqué at the heart of the defense, Sergio Busquets as the pivot, Xavi as the architect, Andres Iniesta as the artist, Pedro and David Villa as the attackers. 8 men from Barcelona, from one training ground, one youth system, one philosophy of football that Pep Guardiola had taken and pushed to its absolute extreme. 7 of those 8 started the World Cup final against Holland. 7. In the most important match in Spanish football history, the manager Del Bosque sent out a team that was, functionally, FC Barcelona wearing red shirts. The system was tiki-taka, the same short passing, the same pressing, the same positional play that Guardiola had built at the Camp Nou and that had destroyed every opponent in La Liga and the Champions League the previous season. And then, the number that should be framed on the wall of every football tactical classroom in the world. Spain scored 8 goals at the 2010 World Cup. Every single one of them was scored by a Barcelona player. David Villa scored 5. Andres Iniesta scored 2. Carles Puyol scored 1. 8 goals, 8 Barcelona players. 0 goals from anyone outside of La Masia's greatest generation. In the 116th minute of the final, with the score at 0-0 and the whole world watching, Cesc Fabregas, another Barcelona-educated player, playing for Arsenal at the time, slid a pass through to Andres Iniesta, who controlled it, let it drop, and hit it into the corner of the Dutch net. The whole of Spain erupted. The whole of Barcelona wept, because in that moment, they were the same thing. The club and the country had become one. And a La Masia-educated player scored the goal that gave Spain its first World Cup. 4 players from that Spain squad were named in FIFA's team of the tournament. All 4 were Barcelona players. Puyol, Iniesta, Xavi, Villa. The best player of the tournament was Xavi Hernandez, who had spent his entire professional life at the Camp Nou. The winning goal scorer was Andres Iniesta, who had spent his entire professional life at the Camp Nou. This was not Spain winning the World Cup with Barcelona players. This was Barcelona winning the World Cup in Spain's name. The 2026 World Cup is months away. 3 countries, 1 tournament. And already, if you know where to look, the same patterns are forming. The same question is being asked. Which club is about to become a national team this summer? FC Barcelona and Spain. 16 years after 2010, the same story is being written at La Masia. Lamine Yamal, 18 years old, second in the Ballon d'Or vote, the most talked about teenager in world football. Pedri, the closest thing to Iniesta the game has produced since Iniesta himself. Fermin Lopez, Pau Cubarsí, Dani Olmo, Ferran Torres, Joan Garcia, all Barcelona, all expected to be central to Spain's campaign this summer. Gavi, Marc Bernal, and Alejandro Balde also have possibilities to join them, if they can stay fit between now and June. The tiki-taka DNA never left La Masia. It simply waited for a new generation to carry it. The question this summer is not whether Barcelona will dominate Spain's squad. They already do. The question is whether they will, once again, win the whole thing. Paris Saint-Germain and France. 5 PSG players have been confirmed in France's recent squads ahead of the World Cup. Ousmane Dembélé, Bradley Barcola, Desiré Doué, Lucas Hernandez, and Warren Zaïre-Emery. Dembélé won the Ballon d'Or last year. Barcola and Doué are among the most exciting young forwards on the planet. And the ghost hovering over all of this is 2018, when PSG's Mbappé became the second teenager after Pelé to score in a World Cup final. France have always had individual genius. This summer, they may have something rarer, a collective identity built around the Champions League winners, just as Spain had in 2010, just as Germany had in 2014. And then there is England, the most painful story in this whole conversation. John Stones, Phil Foden, James Trafford, Mark Guehi, and Nico O'Reilly are expected in Tuchel's squad for North America. Guardiola's tactical fingerprints are all over how England's best players think about the game. Foden, in particular, is a product of the City system in the way that Iniesta was a product of La Masia, a player who absorbed an entire football philosophy and made it his own. England have never won a World Cup since 1966. They have never had a generation of players shaped by a single club system as complete as this one. Could City's DNA finally give England what 60 years of individual talent never could? The answer, this summer in North America, is about to be written. 3 clubs, 3 national teams, 3 stories that echo the greatest entries on this list. The World Cup has always been sold as a competition between nations. But the evidence, from 1998 to 2010 to 2014, and now to 2026, suggests that the clubs have always been there, quietly at the center of it all. running the game from the training ground, winning it from the dressing room. The shirt changes, the philosophy does not. This was another football day. We will see you at the World Cup.